All right, people, this one is a big one here, literally and figuratively. This is the Alienware M18 R2, and this monster is probably one of the best 18-inch gaming laptops out there. Now, Alienware, of course, updated this from the R1 last year. I will say right off the bat, it's not a huge upgrade, but if you could find this on sale right now as we round out 2024, head into 2025, this might be one to look at simply because this one does pack a lot of power under the hood. We're looking at the Core i9-14900HX, which of course is a very powerful processor, 14th gen from Intel. It also has the RTX 4090. So if you're going to be serious about gaming and want a desktop replacement, this is the one to go with. Now, it is a big monster. It's got a big 18-inch display, QHD plus resolution, 165 hertz refresh rate. The screen can go back as far as you see there. But overall, I think this is a really good. Now, the keyboard is a mechanical keyboard. It's got the Cherry MX switches, so very satisfying. It's got a full-size numpad for those number crunchers that need to do some number crunching, especially when you're not gaming and doing some work. Got a nice touchpad. Overall, it's a really nice all-metal chassis here. Again, this is a desktop replacement. It is on the big side, so you're not going to be carrying this a lot, but you can move it around if you need to. Now, it does come with this pretty big, and you could probably see it there, it's plugged in, but pretty big 360-watt power charger, uses a barrel pin connection, and this thing will power this monster. 360 watts is nothing to sneeze at. So pretty nice overall package. Let's find out if it's still worth it here in 2024. I anticipate getting new models coming in. We're going to hear some announcements for CES, but you might get this on sale at some point, and maybe on sale right now. We'll check the latest link in the description below. But let's check out the Alienware M18 R2 as we round out 2024. Coming up. Now, before we get to the unit itself, I just want to let everyone know, in the interest of transparency, full disclosure, I'm not being paid by Dell, I'm not being sponsored by Dell. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Dell is not getting copy approval. This unit was provided by Dell, and once this review is done, I'll be sending it back. Now, when it comes to pricing, it ranges anywhere from $1,599 all the way up to $3,000. In fact, that $3,000 unit, which was originally $4,000, is on sale and part of one of their hot deals over at Dell's website. I'll leave a link to the description below. Now, that one, of course, is better than the one I have here because I have 32 gigabytes of RAM, 2 terabytes of storage. That one doubles it in both categories. So if you want something really maxed out at a pretty good price for what you're getting, you may want to check that out. Links for everything will be in the description below. I also link to Best Buy. They have a SKU for $2,500, but it doesn't have the 4090. It has the 4070, 32 gigabytes of RAM and a terabyte of storage. Same display, of course. I'll leave links for everything in the description below. Now, you have to keep in mind, this is a desktop replacement. It's really not that portable, especially with its size and weight. It comes in at 3.955 kilograms or 8.72 pounds. And the power supply itself is over a kilogram, 1.76 kilograms or 2.37 pounds. So it really is a lot to take with you on the go. Although it is portable, it's not a tower or anything like you can't take from room to room. This is a lot more portable. But again, it is a desktop replacement, and it does have an 18-inch display and a pretty big chassis to house all those powerful components. So just keep that in mind. Now, as far as the build, it's pretty excellent. They do a good job here in terms of its all-metal design. It's a very premium feel, but it does have a gamerish type of vibe to it, and that's been the hallmark for Alienware. Although they have toned it down the last couple of years, it's still very much a gaming laptop or gaming desktop replacement, and there's no mistaking it for that, that's for sure. Okay, let's take a look at the port selection. We're going to start off on the left side. We get an RJ45 killer Ethernet port. It's the E5000 5G port is what they're calling it. And of course, next to that are two USB Type A 3.2 Gen 1 ports, one with power share according to their specs. And then you get a 3.5 millimeter microphone headphone combo jack. On the right side is a USB Type-C 3.2 Gen 2, the only port on that side. And then on the back is where all the fun is, all the main ports. Two USB Type-C Thunderbolt 4 ports, a USB Type-A 3.2 Gen 1, an HDMI 2.1 port, a mini display port 1.4, a full-size SD card slot, and your power DC in port to round out the ports on this unit. I would say overall a very good port selection here, that's for sure. Now, when it comes to upgradability in terms of storage, there are actually 4 SSD slots, one 2280 slot with a 2 terabyte drive has excellent reads and writes, and then you get 3 2230 slots to add out more storage if you want. It's a smaller form factor, but nonetheless, having 4 SSD slots are pretty amazing. And again, very good reads and writes on that 2 terabyte included with that 2280 on this one, of course. Now, when it comes to the RAM, you're looking at 32 gigabytes of RAM. It is not soldered in. There are RAM slots here, SODIMM slots, and this is pretty amazing, a rarity nowadays, and having the ability to swap out for more memory as needed is a big, big win in my opinion, so great to see that here. And when it comes to wireless, you're looking at a killer Wi-Fi 7 Bluetooth 5.4 combo card, and that, of course, makes it more future-proof, having Wi-Fi 7 and the Wi-Fi Bluetooth both working flawlessly, no issue with either one. Okay, let's talk about the display. We're looking at an 18-inch QHD Plus display. It has a resolution of 2560 by 1600. That means, of course, it has a 16 to 10 aspect ratio, 165 hertz refresh rate, 3 millisecond response time, 100% RGB, and, of course, 500 nits of brightness is what they're claiming. NVIDIA G-Sync support as well. Now, as far as the brightness, I measured 300 nits. Of course, that is a little bit on the low side. I'd like to see it closer to 400, to be honest, maybe above that. But it is a matte display, so you don't get any unnecessary glare or reflection. So not having the brightest display is not the worst thing in the world, but I would like to see it brighter. Good coverage of the color gamut here. It's got color accuracy that you'd want. A decent contrast here, good black level, good white point, and best of all, no PWM or screen flickering to deal with here. It is an IPS display, something you'd have to deal with OLED. You don't have that here, so pretty good in that regard. And it goes without saying, having that 18 inches of screen real estate is great, especially if you want to be productive when not gaming and doing work. It's going to be great for that in terms of seeing as much as you can on the display. But of course, being an 18-inch display here on a pretty big device in terms of weight and size, you're going to maybe look at this like a desktop replacement. Of course, you could always add an external display here for multi-display action, of course. So that's been pretty good as well. So overall, pretty good in terms of the display. Not the best display in the world, but definitely good, especially if you're going to do gaming, and the fact that it is not glossy, the fact that it is 165 hertz. Now, I would have liked to have seen 240 hertz like you do get on its smaller sibling, the M16 R2, but of course, this one is a pretty good display in its own right. Now, one thing I noticed here watching movies, Netflix, Amazon, YouTube, everything worked out pretty well in terms of that, but it's not an HDR display. If you want HDR, you'll have to connect to an external monitor. But that being said, at this price point, I would like to see HDR. Now, one thing I did notice here as we round out the display here, there is some uneven backlight bleeding that I noticed, although not a deal breaker. It is something you need to be aware of. I'd like to see that improved in the next iteration. All right, so this is the 1080p camera here on the Alienware M18 R2 for 2024. 1080p, as I mentioned. It's an IR camera. That means you can log in with face recognition with Windows Hello. What do you think about the video quality, and what do you think about the audio quality? Let me know. Now, when it comes to the keyboard, I'm happy to report that it has the Cherry MX Ultra Low Profile mechanical keyboard, and I gotta tell you, typing on it is really satisfying. You get that clickiness of a mechanical keyboard. Tactility, overall feedback is excellent. I had no trouble typing pretty fast on this and pretty accurate at that, so I like having these Cherry MX switches, and it has the per key RGB lighting, so you can play with that in the settings. That has been pretty good, so overall, a very good typing experience with this keyboard. Now, for those number crunchers, when you're not gaming, you do have the numeric keypad, and it is properly laid out, I'm happy to report. So pretty good in that regard as well for those that need to have a numpad. Now, the touchpad is pretty good here. It's got a multi-touch gesture control there, and of course, it has integrated scrolling. That has worked out really well. So everything worked as you'd expect with it. It's not a haptic touchpad, so just keep that in mind, but a good touchpad nonetheless. I don't have a real complaint with that. And this is packing a pretty big punch under the hood. This is rocking the Core i9-14900HX, 24 cores, 8 performance cores, 16 efficient cores, with a total of 32 threads. And the single-core, multi-core performance on this are pretty much off the charts. Very powerful performance. This is going to be a desktop replacement due to its sheer size, big screen, of course, and that will be really good for doing everyday tasks. Not only gaming with AAA gaming, but you're going to be able to do things like video editing in Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, result. 4K video editing was very good on this, so I really recommend this for those who want a general purpose desktop replacement, don't want to have a tower, and want the ability to move this around. This is going to fit that bill. Now, when it comes to the graphics, you're looking at the NVIDIA RTX 4090, 175 watts total TDP here, and as you can see, the Time Spy is excellent, Firestrike score, Wildlife Extreme, all high-end scores here. Very premium performance out of this graphics card. There's no doubt about that. And you could play your AAA titles on 4K settings here. And I think it goes without saying that this is not a huge improvement over last year rocking the same GPU. So you're not going to see a big improvement in terms of that. There are a few things here and there. So if you have last year's model, you're probably safe with the one you have. You don't necessarily need to upgrade. Although if you can get this on sale, that's a different story. But as far as playing the games, you really are not limited here. The RTX 4090 is very powerful here and pretty much a great performer when it comes to playing games. So no doubt about that as well. And when I ran the Time Spy stress test to see if this will thermal throttle under heavy load, good news here, it got a passing score of 98.5%, meaning it detected virtually no thermal throttling under load. And that's a good thing. Now, when we took a look inside, you might have also noticed that it has a triple fan setup in there in terms of the cooling. A lot of ventilation, a lot of heating vents up there that will give it pretty good cooling effect. And that really does translate into having very good surface temperatures here, even under maximum load, never getting overly hot. So very good when it comes to the surface temperatures. But of course, with that comes the fan noise, and you will notice it, especially in performance when doing things like AAA gaming and that stuff. And that will certainly be noticeable in terms of the decibel level, but not overly loud, and the whirl is not so bad. And when you're doing everyday tasks, the fan noise was not an issue at all. So just keep that in mind when thinking about fan noise and stuff like that. Now, when it comes to battery life, this has a pretty large 97 watt-hour battery. Remember, the legal limit to take on an airplane is 100 watt-hours, so that is pretty good in terms of the size. And runtimes remain about the same as the R1 version from last year, so not a big difference in terms of any battery gains or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. Web surfing test, you're looking at about 5 hours, maybe a little less than 5 hours. Gaming, maybe less than an hour. Again, you're not buying this for the battery life. You're buying this as a desktop replacement, so just keep that in mind. But really 4 to 5 hours is what you're going to get when doing everyday tasks. Really not much of a battery beast here, even though it does have that very large 97 watt-hour battery. All right, now to get a sound test, I have the Alienware M18 R2 here. I have the M16 R2. Different sound. I actually think this sounds better, the smaller one, which is kind of surprising. But let you be the judge. You let me know what you think in the comment section below. Now, let's give them a listen. All right, let's bring it all home. What do I think about the Alienware M18 R2 as we round out the year? And of course, this has been out for a while, and we're seeing massive sales over at Dell's website. So if you're in the market for a desktop replacement, make sure you check out the links in the description below. But I can safely say if you have last year's model, the R1, I don't think you necessarily need to upgrade to the R2. Although if you do find it on a discount, maybe it is something to consider. But I think if you have the R1, you're pretty safe not upgrading. But that being said, it's got a really nice 18-inch QHD display. It's got 165 hertz. I really like those mechanical keyboard there in terms of the Cherry MX switches. One of my favorites of a gaming laptop or any laptop. I really like having that mechanical feel to it, that really good tactility. That's a big win here. I like the performance out of the RTX 4090. You're going to get really great performance in terms of gaming, video editing, 4K, stuff like that. You'll have no issues with this. You can play 4K video, 4K games, I should say, without any issues. Now, the negatives, like I said, no notable performance benefits over last year's model. The display exhibits some uneven backlight bleeding, so just keep that in mind, although not a deal breaker, something to be aware of. And it is heavier than other 18-inch laptops in this category. That being said, if you're looking for an 18-inch desktop replacement that you can take with you occasionally, it is somewhat portable, although it is heavy and it's big. You will notice it in your bag, but you really are using this to replace a desktop, a tower. So this certainly fits the bill. And if you can get it on a really great sale, I highly recommend it here as we round out 2024 and head into 2025. That is for sure.